I found out my land had been rezoned by accident. Not from the county, not from a lawyer, not from some official notice sitting in my mailbox. No, I found out because a woman in a cream-colored blazer smiled at me like we were old friends and said, "We're very excited to move into phase 2 of the acquisition process." Acquisition process. That's corporate language for we already decided this belongs to us. And the crazy part is, up until that moment, I thought I was just some middle-aged guy holding on to a quiet piece of farmland outside Millhaven County, the kind of place people drive past without even noticing. 36 acres, mostly flat ground, soybeans in the spring, corn in the fall, one rusted gate that squealed every time you opened it. And honestly, I love that stupid gate more than most people love their luxury cars. I bought the property back in 2005 after my divorce because I needed silence, needed somewhere that didn't remind me of lawyers, alimony checks, and 2 years of sleeping on my brother's couch. The land cost me $190,000 at the time, which everybody said was a terrible investment because there's nothing out there except dirt and mosquitoes. Turns out dirt gets real valuable when developers start drooling over highway exits. For nearly 20 years, I leased the property to a local farmer named Wade. Good guy, smelled permanently like diesel fuel and black coffee. Paid me $4,000 a year to grow crops there, enough to cover taxes and maintenance. Simple arrangement, no drama, no headaches, until Ridgeline Commercial Group showed up. First contact came through a glossy letter that looked more like an invitation to a luxury resort than a business offer. Thick paper, embossed logo, expensive ink. Rich people always want you to smell the money before they try taking your property. They offered me $2.3 million for the land. Cash purchase, quick close. Now listen, I'm not stupid. That's life-changing money for a guy who spent most of his adult life fixing HVAC systems and eating gas station sandwiches between service calls. But something about the offer bothered me because companies don't throw around millions unless they're expecting to make tens of millions more. So I called the number on the letter. That's when I met Vanessa. Smooth voice, calm, practiced, the kind of woman who could probably convince you to donate your kidney and thank her afterward. She explained Ridgeline was building a regional lifestyle destination around the interstate corridor. You know what that means in plain English? Chain restaurants, giant parking lots, fake little fountains, and stores selling candles for $40. She kept talking about economic growth, community expansion, tax revenue. All the buzzwords officials use right before they bulldoze something people actually care about. Then she slipped in one sentence that made my stomach tighten. Your parcel sits directly in the center of our development footprint. There it was. That's why the number was so high. I wasn't just another seller. I was the missing puzzle piece. I told her I'd think about it, and for about a week, I actually did. Hell, I even sketched out a little retirement cabin in Tennessee on a napkin while eating breakfast at Denny's. Then Vanessa called back, sweeter this time, more pressure hidden beneath the politeness. Offer increased to $2.6 million. She said investors were eager to move forward and delays could complicate construction schedules. Construction schedules. Funny how rich people act like their deadlines become your emergencies. I still said no. That's when her tone changed. Barely, but enough. She paused and said, "You may want to attend the County Planning Commission meeting next Thursday." No explanation, no details, just that. And buddy, when somebody with a corporate smile tells you to attend a government meeting, your survival instincts better kick in. So Thursday night, I drove down to the county administration building wearing muddy work boots and an old flannel jacket. And the second I walked inside, I knew something was wrong. The room was packed, developers in tailored suits, county officials pretending not to make eye contact, engineers with giant blueprint tubes tucked under their arms. They all looked prepared, except me. Then the projector screen lit up. Massive shopping complex. Hotels. Restaurants. Multi-level retail space. Estimated value, $310 million. And right in the dead center of the map was my property, outlined in bright red like a target. Not if acquired. Not pending negotiation. No. The label said, Future Commercial Integration Zone. Like the deal was already done. I stood up so fast my chair slammed backward into the wall, and everybody turned to stare at me. I remember pointing at the screen and saying, "You people planning on asking before you build half a damn city on my land?" The room went dead quiet for maybe 3 seconds. Then Vanessa smiled. Not nervous, not embarrassed, just calm, like she'd rehearsed this moment in the mirror. And she said, "Mr. Mercer, discussions are ongoing." Discussions? Meanwhile, these people had already designed roads through my property like I was some inconvenience they'd eventually pressure into disappearing. Then the commission voted unanimously to approve the project framework. Didn't even hesitate. Whole thing took less than 4 minutes. For minutes to decide the future of land I'd owned for 20 years. After the meeting ended, Vanessa walked over and handed me a business card for Ridgeline's legal department like she was giving me a dinner reservation. Then she leaned closer and quietly said something that made my blood run cold. "Honestly, I'm surprised nobody told you the rezoning was already approved 6 months ago." Now let me pause the story for a second because this right here, this is where regular people get steamrolled, not because they're dumb, but because they assume the system automatically protects them. It doesn't. According to standard procedure, whenever a county wants to rezone property, especially agricultural land into commercial use, they're supposed to notify the owner directly, usually through certified mail, public notices, hearings, sometimes even signage posted near the property itself. That's the basic process. The problem is, developers and local officials know most people never check zoning filings, never attend planning meetings, never imagine somebody's trying to redesign their future behind closed doors. And once paperwork starts moving, momentum becomes its own weapon. From a legal perspective, what Ridgeline appeared to be doing was incredibly aggressive. They filed development plans that treated my property like a future asset before they even controlled it. Technically, developers can sometimes propose projects involving adjacent parcels they don't yet own, but there's supposed to be transparency, negotiation, due process. Not this weird little shell game where notices somehow vanish into thin air. And psychologically, this is a classic pressure tactic. This is a psychological trap developers use all the time. Create inevitability. Make the landowner feel isolated, outnumbered, already defeated. If they can convince you the machine is too big to stop, most people eventually fold because fighting City Hall sounds exhausting, expensive, and honestly kind of hopeless. That's the entire strategy. They don't always need to beat you legally. They just need you tired enough to surrender voluntarily. The lesson here is simple. The second somebody tells you the decision has basically already been made, that's exactly when you need to start digging deeper, because powerful people love acting like resistance is pointless right before they realize you're not playing along. The next morning, I drove straight to the county zoning office. And let me tell you something, government buildings always smell the same: burnt coffee, old carpet, and quiet corruption. I walked in carrying a folder with my property records, tax statements, and enough irritation to power a small city. The woman behind the counter looked nervous the second I gave her my parcel number. Not confused, nervous. That's how I knew this thing went deeper than some paperwork mistake. She disappeared into the back room for almost 20 minutes, and when she finally returned, she handed me a stack of rezoning documents thick enough to stop a bullet. Sure enough, there it was in black and white. My agricultural property had officially been changed to C5 regional commercial nearly 7 months earlier. 7 months. Nobody called me. Nobody emailed me. No certified letter. Nothing. According to the file, notification had supposedly been mailed to the property address itself, which was absurd because there wasn't even a mailbox on the land, just a rusted cattle gate and 2 acres of soybean rows. Meanwhile, the county had my actual mailing address on every single tax record for almost 2 decades. That's when my irritation turned into something colder. Because mistakes happen, but selective mistakes? Those usually come with fingerprints attached. I hired a land use attorney named Graham Pierce that same afternoon. Older guy, looked permanently annoyed even while smiling. The kind of lawyer who probably billed people for blinking too long in meetings. First thing he said after reviewing the documents was, "Oh, they got sloppy. Not unethical. Not questionable. Sloppy," which somehow sounded worse. Graham dug through the filing history and found the detail that changed everything. Ridgeline's original rezoning application actually listed my correct mailing address. Somewhere between the original submission and the county approval process, somebody manually altered the notification records. Suddenly, my legal case stopped being about zoning and started smelling a whole lot like intentional procedural misconduct. And once you start hinting government officials manipulated notice requirements to benefit private developers, people get real uncomfortable real fast. We filed an emergency appeal within 48 hours. Ridgeline responded immediately with an army of attorneys wearing $1,000 suits and expressions that practically screamed, "Why is this hillbilly still talking?" That became the entire vibe of the conflict after that. They treated me like an obstacle that simply hadn't accepted reality yet. At the first hearing, Ridgeline's lead attorney stood there talking about regional economic stimulation, projected tax growth, job creation, all the shiny corporate phrases designed to make one private citizen look selfish for resisting. I remember him actually saying, the broader community benefit should outweigh isolated individual objections. Isolated individual objections. Buddy, that isolated individual owns the damn land. Graham got up afterward, adjusted his glasses, and absolutely gutted them. Calmly, methodically, like a guy filleting a fish he's cleaned 1,000 times before. He showed the court how every surrounding property owner had received proper mailed notice except me. Then he presented Ridgeline's original filing containing my correct address. You could literally feel the room shift. One county commissioner suddenly became fascinated by his own shoes. Another started aggressively drinking water like hydration might save him from a perjury charge. The judge asked the county attorney one simple question. Can you explain why the address was changed? Dead silence. Honest-to-God silence. And that was the moment I realized they never expected anyone to push back hard enough to expose the process publicly. They thought I'd panic, take the money, disappear quietly, and let everybody cash their checks in peace. Instead, the judge invalidated the rezoning entirely. My land reverted back to agricultural status immediately. Now, if this were a movie, that would have been the ending. Except wealthy developers don't lose gracefully. Ridgeline appealed within days. Bigger legal team this time, expert witnesses, traffic analysts, economic consultants. They basically assembled the Avengers of corporate real estate greed. One consultant actually testified that delaying the project could negatively impact regional consumer growth opportunities. I still laugh about that one. Translation? Rich investors might have to wait longer before building another cheesecake factory next to a luxury pet spa. But here's where things got ugly behind the scenes. Once Ridgeline realized legal pressure wasn't enough, they shifted toward intimidation wrapped in politeness. I started getting random visits from interested buyers, strangers taking photos near my gate, anonymous calls asking whether I understood how expensive prolonged litigation could become. One night, Wade, the farmer leasing my land, called and said somebody had driven trucks through the field after midnight, tearing up irrigation lines. No proof who did it, but come on. Small towns aren't subtle. Then came the county board meeting from hell. Ridgeline pushed for a second rezoning vote, this time making sure all notification procedures were technically correct. They packed the room with business owners, union reps, local politicians, everybody talking about jobs, growth, opportunity, progress. And honestly, that's what made the situation complicated. Because not everybody supporting the project was evil. Some genuinely believed the development would help the area. New tax revenue, better roads, more businesses. That's the dirty truth about these fights. Corruption hides best inside projects that still offer partial benefits. But my issue wasn't development itself. It was the idea that powerful people could quietly rewrite ownership rights when enough money entered the conversation. So when my turn came to speak, I didn't yell, didn't grandstand. I just walked to the microphone and told them the truth. I said, if this project is so good for the community, why did the process begin with hiding information from the property owners standing in the middle of it? You could hear air conditioning humming in the silence afterward. Then Graham delivered the legal kill shot. He argued the rezoning qualified as illegal spot zoning because the county was effectively creating a commercial island around one unwilling agricultural parcel solely to satisfy a private developer's design. From a legal perspective, that's dangerous territory because courts hate when zoning appears arbitrary or tailored for specific corporate interests instead of legitimate planning principles. The commission voted later that night. Rezoning denied. Ridgeline's executives looked stunned. Vanessa especially. I'll never forget her face. Not angry, just genuinely confused, like she couldn't process a world where money and pressure failed to produce obedience. And that's when the real collapse started. Because my land sat directly in the center of their master site plan. 36 acres of protected agricultural zoning, splitting their commercial footprint like an axe through glass. They tried redesigning around it. Moved parking lots. Shifted access roads. Downsized anchor retail space. But every adjustment created another problem. Traffic engineers discovered the new entrance design caused dangerous congestion at the highway intersection. Ridgeline had to spend nearly $500,000 adding turn lanes and drainage modifications. Then heavy rains hit during construction season. And because they'd altered the grading plan so many times, stormwater flooded huge sections of the development site. Weeks of delays. Millions bleeding out by the month. Contractors started suing each other. Then came the domino that killed everything. Their primary anchor tenant backed out. Rumor around town said corporate leadership lost confidence after construction costs exploded and traffic projections worsened. Once the anchor store walked away, smaller retailers started panicking too. That's the thing about commercial developments. They operate on confidence. The second investors smell instability. Everybody starts reaching for exits at the same time. By late 2024, Ridgeline had reportedly spent over $90 million while only leasing a little more than half the retail space. Empty storefronts sat baking in the sun while giant, coming soon, banners flapped around like lies in the wind. Then one afternoon, nearly 2 years after this whole nightmare started, my phone rang again. Vanessa. Her voice sounded different now, less polished, tired. She skipped the corporate script completely and got straight to the point. Mr. Mercer, Ridgeline would like to renew discussions regarding your property. Renew discussions. Funny phrase considering they'd spent 2 years trying to bulldoze me emotionally, politically, and legally. New offer, $3.4 million. I walked outside while she talked and looked across the field. Wade's winter crops moving in the wind, sunset cutting orange light across the soybeans, that same rusty gate creaking near the road. And for the first time since this battle started, I realized something important. I wasn't fighting because of the money anymore. I was fighting because somewhere along the line these people convinced themselves ownership was conditional, that ordinary people were temporary obstacles standing in the path of important money. So I told her no again. Long silence after that. Then Vanessa sighed and said something almost human for once. You really intend to keep it? I said, yep. She laughed softly, exhausted, defeated. You know this project may collapse without your parcel. And I remember leaning against my truck smiling like the pettiest man alive, because after everything they'd done, hearing that felt better than any check they could have written. A few months later, local business journals started reporting Ridgeline was facing restructuring talks with lenders. Contractors filed liens. Investors bailed. County officials suddenly pretended they'd never been especially supportive of the development in the first place. Amazing how quickly political enthusiasm evaporates when bankruptcy lawyers enter the chat. Meanwhile, I hired an architect from Lexington to design a modest retirement house near the north edge of my property. Nothing fancy. Big porch, metal roof, workshop out back, maybe a fishing pond eventually. And every once in a while, I drive past the half-empty commercial site they managed to build around me. This weird broken horseshoe of asphalt and struggling retail space wrapped around 36 acres of active farmland they couldn't touch. Honestly, it looks ridiculous, which somehow makes it even more satisfying. You know what still cracks me up about this whole thing? People around town act like I pulled off some genius master plan, like I outsmarted a billion-dollar industry with chess moves and secret strategies. Truth is, I was just stubborn. That's it. Stubborn enough to ask questions when everybody else expected me to quietly cash out and disappear. And honestly, that's probably the bigger lesson buried underneath all this drama. Most systems, government, corporate, HOA boards, zoning commissions, whatever, they rely heavily on one assumption. Regular people are too intimidated, too busy, or too exhausted to challenge the process. Once enough officials, consultants, attorneys, and executives stand in the same room repeating the same talking points, people start doubting their own instincts. They think, well, maybe this is already decided. That's the psychological pressure machine. This is a psychological trap because it creates artificial inevitability. If they can make resistance feel embarrassing or hopeless, they usually win before the real fight even starts. And look, I'm not anti-development. Towns grow. Businesses expand. Change happens. According to standard procedure, communities absolutely should evolve when projects genuinely benefit the public and follow transparent legal processes. But there's a massive difference between lawful negotiation and quiet manipulation dressed up as progress. From a legal perspective, property rights only mean something if ordinary people can actually enforce them. Otherwise, ownership becomes temporary, conditional upon whether somebody wealthier wants your land badly enough. That's the dangerous part. Not the mall, not the money, the mindset. Because once officials start treating due process like an annoying technicality instead of a constitutional responsibility, trust collapses fast. The lesson here is, never assume silence means fairness. Read the notices. Check the filings. Attend the boring meetings nobody wants to attend. Ask uncomfortable questions when everybody else suddenly starts speaking in polished corporate slogans. Sometimes the difference between keeping your property and losing it happens inside tiny details buried in paperwork nobody expects you to read. And maybe the strangest part? I probably could have taken the final offer and lived comfortably somewhere else. Bigger house, less stress, easier life. But every time I imagine that version of the story, it feels wrong. Because then the ending becomes, powerful people got exactly what they wanted after enough pressure. And I think we already have too many stories that end that way. So now I'm curious what you would have done. If a corporation offered you millions for land your family held onto for decades, but you knew they played dirty to get leverage over you, would you still sell? Or would you hold the line just to prove some things aren't supposed to be bullied into submission? Let me know in the comments.